All right. Well, I got to put my 5:32. Sorry for the late start. Good evening. Welcome, everybody. This is a special board meeting scheduled for, what is today anyway? May 10th. Yeah, May 10th, 2022. 2023. Yeah. And it's, dang it, I knew I'd get it right sooner or later. We'll come to order at this time. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lara,
Here.
Ms. Cabral, Mrs. Cordero,
Present.
Mr. Valencia,
Present.
Mr. Hollinshead.
Here. Could you all stand for the pledge, please? Since you were the last to the dais, Mr. Valencia, could you lead us, please? This evening's interpreters are Cesar Ruiz and Sandra Carranza. And if you would be so kind, if there are speakers or when you're speaking, just kind of remember the translation sometimes needs to catch up a little bit. So just be aware of that. And then greeting and support is going to be provided tonight by Maria Cortez. And do we have a motion to accept the agenda? I'll second. Moved by Mrs. Cordero and seconded by Mr. Lara that the agenda be accepted as presented. Roll call.
Mr. Lara,
Aye.
Ms. Cabral, Mrs. Cordero,
Aye.
Mr. Valencia,
Aye.
Mr. Hollinshead.
Aye. Okay, moving on to item 1F, public comment. Or the action item, approval of math adoption. Hello, team.
Good evening, board members, Dr. McDuffie, Mr. Beecher, and all of our audience members. We're excited to be here tonight. With me, I have the TNL team who are going to help highlight the timeline of events and the pilot results for our math curriculum adoption. We will close our presentation with making a recommendation for the new math program that the piloting teachers identified as the best fit for our teachers and our students. But before I begin, I'd like to introduce the team that is with me here tonight. We have Sarah Cameron, who's the coordinator of teaching and learning. We have our Dream STEAM team, Ryan Hubbard, Muriel Bukema, and Nikki Wallingford. And then we also have our IMC manager, Bonnie Wolf Moss, who answers any questions about contract language. Okay. So as you know, from information that we've shared in the past, this adoption cycle has been a little bit untraditional. And because of that, we've had to take some additional steps along the way. And our team would like to provide you with an overview of what those steps have been and what has transpired over the last couple of years. In order to tell this story, I'd like to have you reference the table that you see on your screen. And for the moment, if you would just focus in on that first column called California Mathematics Framework. If you take a look at that, what you'll see is the typical adoption cycle, the plan that we had as a district for our next math adoption after we adopted the previous math programs. In California, every couple of years or so, California looks at the math framework and they make updates to the math framework, not the math standards, but the math framework. And unfortunately, there has been a delay, and that's where the complications begin. You can see by looking at that first column that the framework was intended to be released in the 2021 school year. And then you can see that there were delays. And at this point in time, the projected release date is 2023. If that were to happen in 2023, publishers take a year or so to then respond to any shifts that are called out by the state of California. Then California vets the curriculum to have a state-approved list that school districts then enter into a pilot for. Because the framework has not been adopted, we've had to take a different step and follow what's called an off-cycle adoption. If you take a look at the center column, you'll see what our reality was going to be. And before I go through this column, I would say that we all agreed, everybody involved, the steering committee and many others who gave input, that what's represented in this middle column was not best for our teachers and was not best for our students. The first reason it was not best for students or teachers is because CPM and Go Math are both not currently considered high quality curriculum. These programs actually have, Go Math in particular, so many gaps identified by not just Achieve the Core, but by our team as well, that we've had to supplement Go Math curriculum in multiple grade levels, also taking out complete sections of the program that aren't appropriate for a grade level. So you have the first challenge, which is the curriculum the best quality of curriculum? You have the next challenge, which is the timeline. If we were to wait on the state to provide that adopted list, we would end up with a gap curriculum for our teachers. What that means is Go Math and CPM, our contract would end. Go Math is no longer going to be published. However, the publisher said, we'll give you a 2-year extension at a very significant cost, but no more than 2 years. So best case scenario, we would have a gap curriculum for 1 year. Gap curriculums are not popular or good for anyone. And to further highlight the need to do an off-cycle adoption is that the program is no longer going to be published after this current school year. And so we were really backed into a corner. What do we do next? And so if you then look at option C, the column on the far right, what you'll see is the path we elected to follow. You can see that we have our current curriculum and we have the 22-23 school year. You can see where we've piloted some programs, and then you can see the plan for implementation, new program hopefully starting next year. You can also see that this is a recommendation for 6 years, but on year 4, we hope that California will have released its framework and that any and all publishers, if changes are needed to be made, they will make them. We have been assured by the programs we are recommending this evening that not only will they make them, they will provide them at no additional cost to us, which is not something we typically benefit from. Because of all of these reasons, we decided to follow the off-cycle adoption process.
Good evening. So right around the same time that we learned that the framework was delayed, we were provided an opportunity to be engaged in the California Curriculum Collaborative, which is an organization that was going to help districts or county offices proceed through this off-cycle or off-list adoption process. So we applied for this opportunity through a very rigorous application process, and we were chosen to be one of the few districts that proceeded through this opportunity. During the workshop sessions, we received training on what it means to purchase or to go through an adoption for programs that are not on the CDE approved list. Using Ed reports as our first checkpoint, our steering committee, which is made up of TOSAs, classroom teachers, and administrators, we were able to determine what steps were needed to be able to go through the process in a very robust way. Our pilotees were recruited in the spring of 2022, and their journey began with a 4-part learning series to make sure they were aware of how to select high-quality instructional materials and engage in the mathematical practices at a level that made them confident to be able to choose the best curriculum for our students. Educational partners were also provided opportunities to engage in the mathematical practices, and you're going to hear a little bit more about that in a bit. In addition to the work that we did with the California Curriculum Collaborative, we also partnered with a company called Pivot Learning. They're a specialized organization that provides guidance to districts that are providing or that are conducting an off-cycle or off-list pilot. Since this is our first time proceeding through this kind of process, we felt it was important to add this additional layer of support. We've mentioned EdReports and wanted to share a little bit more about this nonprofit independent company. Because we did not have a CDE approved list, we used EdReports as our first step in identifying the potential high quality instructional materials that we wanted to put in front of our students. They recruit highly qualified teachers to take a comprehensive deep dive into curriculum to identify whether or not they are fully aligned to the Common Core standards. We wanted to share the EdReport scores for our current math programs. We currently are using Go Math for K-6 and CPM for 7-8. Several years ago, when these programs were purchased, they were good options for our district. These scores came out after our last adoption, and as we learned more about Common Core and the engagement in Common Core standards through our curriculum. You will notice that Go Math and CPM 7th grade did not pass Gateways 1 or 2, and therefore did not receive a score for Gateway 3. Since then, we have learned a lot more about what the intent of the Common Core math standards include. And we have provided, as Jennifer mentioned, supplemental resources to our teachers to fill the gaps in our current programs. Curriculum developers are now making their alignment to Common Core standards more intentional and have improved the teacher and student experience. In order to be considered as even an option for our math pilot, all of the scores that you see on the screen would need to be green. And we call this the green lit programs. Here are the EdReport scores for the programs we piloted in our classrooms this spring. For K-5, we piloted or field tested Reveal Math and iReady. For 6th through 8th grade, we piloted or field tested Core and iReady. You will notice they are all green lit. They also passed our district non-negotiables checklist and math priorities developed by our steering committee through the Learning with the California Curriculum Collaborative. Once the programs reached this level, we knew that whatever program was chosen by our pilotees would be high quality and would be the best fit for our students. Here's a screenshot of the rubric that was used for the classroom field test during the pilot by our piloting teachers. The content of the rubric is a holistic representation of our math priorities, which are inclusive of the following benchmarks: daily implementation of the program, mathematical practices, student ownership, the planning process, assessment, culturally responsive practices, ease of access, and the online experience. We would like to take a quick moment to thank all of our math pilotees for the process that they have engaged in over this last year. The number of hours and the dedication of this team has been incredible. We'd also like to thank our math steering committee, comprised of the members you see behind me, as well as classroom teachers. All teachers were invited to be a part of our math pilot. In the end, we had 28 teachers from 1st through 5th grade, 17 in grades 6 through 8. Special education and DLI teachers were represented. Over 1,000 students experienced these programs, and we had 20 schools participate. I will now turn this over to our amazing STEAM TOSA team. Mariel Bukama is going to lead you through our educational partner engagement. Nikki Wallingford will share the results of the K-5 pilot, and Ryan Hubbard will share the results of the 6-8 pilot.
Good evening, board members. So as mentioned, one of the biggest shifts that we've experienced is in the mathematical practices. And so we wanted to bring that to our educational partners. The standard mathematical practice describes the types of expertise that mathematics educators at all levels want to develop with their students. Because this is going to be one of the bigger shifts within our system, we wanted to design an experience where our educational partners would become the student to see and feel the shift for themselves. When we were engaging members of LCAP, we made callouts to which mathematical practices they were engaging in along the way. The warm-up had them reasoning abstractly and quantitatively and critiquing the reasoning of others. You can see our students sorting cards while considering the questions, what do you notice and what do you wonder? Next, we had students sorting shapes, modeling equal parts with paper, constructing viable arguments, and justifying their choices with their peers. The intentionality of this lesson was to make sure that we were following the concrete, representational, abstract approach, which uses visual aids, including images and manipulatives, to build their understanding of the abstract concept of a fraction. These mathematical practices will frame the student experience with our new math programs. This lesson was replicated with our parent advisory committee. Many expressed that they wish they had learned math in this way. Curriculum being piloted was available on both of these nights to be viewed by our educational partners. Here's some comments of the experience that our parents had. I believe this will be a good approach to properly connect the dots and understand real-life math concepts. This approach of teaching math seems to have much more real-world applicability. Mathematics does not have to be boring and difficult. This new form is more fun so they can learn easily. Making errors can actually be fun and insightful. I will turn it over to Nikki, who will show us our results for the K-5 pilot.
Good evening. I'm the lucky one to share some of the results. So with the K-5 curriculum, our pilotees, our amazing team of pilotees, were able again to field test iReady Mathematics and Reveal Math. And these are the pilot results speaking from the data collected from each of those pilotees. So as you can see on our scale of 250 from our data points that we collected from the rubric, iReady Mathematics outscored Reveal, and you can see the results there. And if we drill down a little bit further, when we looked at those benchmarks that Sarah brought up earlier, iReady actually outscored Reveal in each one of those benchmarks. And I'll leave that up for a moment for you to do a little comparing of your own. And if we take a look by grade level, the trend was across the board. The trend was that iReady came out ahead as well. And if we look at some of our special populations, our special education teachers that participated as pilotees also outscored iReady over Reveal in each and every benchmark. The same goes for our DLI pilotees. Each benchmark in iReady outscored Reveal. So again, we not only took the data, but we took the commentary by our piloting teachers very seriously. And these were some of the thoughts about iReady Mathematics. Students were exposed to many strategies and were able to pick the one that worked for them. They were not limited to one method of expressing their understanding. Students have multiple opportunities to discuss math and cooperate with other students for concept understanding throughout each session. The explore sessions of the lesson provided students with opportunities for productive struggle. And every lesson provides an exit ticket, which gives me good formative data to determine which students I need to pull into a small group. So reflecting on those mathematical practices, we see a lot of that embedded in the thoughts from our teachers. But we didn't just want to capture the teacher's thinking. We also wanted to capture student thinking. And so we had students reflect on their experiences as well. And we have a student who said, in my opinion, iReady is a great learning tool for kids. It gives you assignments to work on math problems that you're not as good at. So it helps you get better at the problem. The thing I like is that iReady shows you your work in progress. I also like that we can take a test to put you in a grade level. Putting a student in a grade level that their brain understands can help them take steps to the grade level they have to be. And I think this was in relation, there's a diagnostic that's part of the iReady program that does place you, that the teacher can use that information, as well as a responsive computer program that relates to their diagnostic results. I really liked it because I liked the measurement and time, and I liked the interactive practice a lot. It helped me a lot. And it was a little bit hard, but we figured it out. It helped me add and subtract. So some of the students in action with iReady, we have some first graders, We have second graders. We see practicing some measurement there. Third graders. Fourth graders. And some fifth graders. So with that information, the pilotee recommendation for our K-5 math curriculum is iReady Mathematics. And I will turn that over to Ryan. There we go.
Hello, everyone. And I get to share the results of the 6th through 8th grade pilot experience. So as a reminder, we also, for 6th through 8th grade, we also classroom field tested iReady Mathematics, and as well as a core curriculum by Mid-School Math. And teachers and students were able to try each of these curriculum for about 6 weeks in their classroom. Again, we use the same rubric to evaluate these that they used in the K-5 classrooms as well. So here's our results for the 6th to 8th grade teachers. And so as you see, the Mid-School Math core curriculum scored 187 points out of our 250 point scale, and iReady 6 through 8 scored 137. So the teachers in our pilot committee preferred the Mid-School Math core curriculum. And here again, the same benchmarks that were in the K-5 evaluation that Sarah went through earlier, the same categories. As you can see, similar to the K-5 experience, Mid-School Math Core scored higher in every single benchmark, significantly higher in several of them. And if we break it down by grade level, as you saw in the K-5 presentation, it was very strongly preferred by 7th and 8th grade, and 6th grade liked them both. And we had special education representation in 6th through 8th grade as well. As you can see, it was very strongly in favor of the Mid-School Math Core program over the iReady 6-8. We did not evaluate the 6th through 8 programs for DLI because in 6th through 8th grade, it's math is taught in English. So we weren't, we did look at the Spanish resources that are available for our students that need that support, but it wasn't specific to the DLI program. And here's some teacher thoughts. As Nikki said, along with the rubric, when they turned their results, the teachers were able to put comments for each of the benchmarks about what they thought about it. And so we picked out some quotes that I thought would be appropriate. As a co-teacher, the amount of time I was directly working with students to solve problems tripled because the work is so student-centered. The students are encouraged to talk to each other and share and support their thinking constantly. Most talking I have seen in my math classes in the last 6 years. There are actually a lot of comments similar to that. That was something that was a very strong point for the pilot teachers, is the Mid-School Math program really encouraged students to speak to each other about math concepts. And that was, they thought that was really a strong point of the Mid-School Math. The lessons were very engaging for the students, and due to their interest, they were willing to engage in productive struggle in the math simulator and simulation trainer. As far as differentiation and scaffolding, everything is already embedded. Lessons are filled with visuals, video modeling, engaging videos, competitive practice of the skill, and direct instruction, all evidence-based practices. Our last teacher comment says, students are asked to self-assess daily. My students were extremely engaged. Some students who had not participated much early in the year began participating and completing assignments. That was another really strong point of the Mid-School Math Core, is the student engagement. There's the math, it's all based around stories, and because the story kind of draws the students into the math, it gives them a reason for wanting to figure out the math because it's tied to a story rather than just blank problems. So that was another strong point for Mid-School Math, was the engagement. A lot of teachers appreciated that. And some students. Some quotes from students. The thing I liked the most about the Mid-School Math program was that it allowed you to work as a team with your peers, and that the ways to learn it were entertaining. Something I liked the most about mid-school math was that we didn't have to do the same thing every day, and that was more engaging and gets me more motivated to work. The things I like about mid-school math is that the videos are fun to watch in the clicker quiz because it makes us think and shows if we got the answer wrong or right. I liked how it brought real-world problems into math. And I liked the student reflection more because I was able to put all the things I learned on one page and explain what happened. So here's some photos of students in action in a 6th grade classroom at Miller. Oh, sorry, this is a 7th grade classroom at El Camino. I can tell because they're all in their blue and white. Here's the 6th graders at Miller. And the pictures show on the screen because the story that introduces the math and gets the kids, that ties the math to a story is video based. And so they watch a video that gets the story going and presents a problem. And then they continue using the story that was presented in the video to do the math for the rest of the week. So that's why there's the various video images up there that the teacher shared. And we have, this is just a real short little clip of some teachers in, again, some students at Miller in the 6th grade class sharing what they liked about mid-school math. You want me to just... No.
Mid-school math, how we go about the videos and taking her to how to learn better. One thing I like about mid-school math is that you can collaborate with your classmates and help each other out.
One thing about mid-school math I like is like how they teach us how to work the problem.
Mid-school math gave us pictures and video examples to give us a better understanding.
One thing I like about mid-school math is that it gave us a lot of time to understand this.
Excellent.
So after that, in summary, the Pilotee Committee recommends the adoption of the mid-school math core curriculum for use in our 6th to 8th grade classrooms. I'm going to turn it back over to Jennifer.
With that, the Pilotee team recommends the following high-quality programs to be implemented beginning in the fall of 2023. And we ask the board to consider these recommendations for our next math adoption. And if the board approves these recommendations by the pilot, here is a little bit of information about the contracts. You can see the cost of iReady on the left, core on the right, and the total cost of the adoption over the next 6 years.
I have only one question. What, if anything, is going to be done with TK?
Great question. Where TK programs are theme-based, all integrated. So the program that they have is inclusive of math, it's inclusive of history, science, and ELA. So they are good for a while.
I just had what was the reasoning that the iReady it wasn't just captivating to the kids, the iReady to the MSM core? Or I mean, was it having to do with the videos? I mean, to really engage them?
You didn't get to see all the details of our rubric, but it's a very robust rubric with all those different categories of benchmarks. And so it's a wide variety of things that was scored of higher. It wasn't just the engagement was one of them. The student ownership was scored significantly higher. But there were every category the teachers thought that mid-school math was the better program for our students.
Well, that's the key word. I think it was the engagement. If that's what's captivating the kids,
that was
and that's what's
I mentioned.
So
Getting the kids to want to learn the math, right? That
Yes.
it's really important, and so that it was significantly stronger in that area.
All right, thank you.
I don't have any questions, but I did go, I do like that it's a problems that both programs are problem solving. not just equations, because that definitely gives the implementation of real world, how to apply it in the real world. Participated in the LCAP thing and the parents loved it. And I mean, yeah, so I like it.
One of my first questions is, what meetings took place with the high school to look at, possible congruence with what the high school district is doing versus the Bonita School District? So what meetings, if any, took place and what did those sound like?
We do have meetings with our math teachers and the high school math teachers, which allow for them to articulate across grade levels. I'm sure you're familiar that those meetings paused for quite some time during COVID. And so it was a new process for us to pull it all back together. With regard to the math program we use versus the math program they use, they're actually at the high school looking into a completely different structure for their math programs, looking at integrated math as opposed to algebra, algebra 2, and geometry, and so on. And so our job now, once they make that final decision, is to then further articulate what our program needs to look like in 7th and 8th, if any adjustments are needed. The other piece that we'll have to consider is what we might do for students who are high achievers in math and want an extra challenge. If algebra is not the option when they are going to 9th grade, it doesn't make a lot of sense to make that our 8th grade option for enrichment. And so there will be conversations that occur over the next couple of years to help us figure that out.
And then a follow-up is, how do we know that because it sounds like we're using two different math programs. How do we know that they're tailored to meet the needs of our students? For example, we know we have a lot of newcomer students, first generation students that are emerging multilingual students, AKA, English language learners. So how do we know that these two are going to be effective with our student population?
I love that you asked that question because it was actually a really important part of the process when we were developing the rubric. Sarah mentioned that there were some non-negotiables. One of the non-negotiables was that, of course, the materials were culturally responsive, but also that we had the robust supports in Spanish and in English, and additional supports both digitally, whether it's online or physically in front of the students. And because that was an area of the rubric, all of the teachers were able to dig in and determine and grade those different sections based on that criteria. Those were non-negotiables.
And then what research, if any, did you all use? I think you all were mentioning earlier, looking at the frameworks. Was there any research, up-to-date research looking at what type of curriculum would work best for our students? And if so, what was that research?
I think I would share that the majority of the research was done last year with the steering committee, and we relied heavily on the experts at Ed Reports, who carefully and very thoroughly vet all of the math programs available, looking at 3 different gateways, all of which are based on what works best for kids and what ensures that they engage in the mathematical practices as identified in the Common Core. So an entire year was spent reviewing that information, looking at every possible program that was available, and all green lit, as Sarah said. We narrowed that down to only 11 programs that met that criteria in entirety. The team then used the non-negotiable rubrics to narrow it down to the 4 that were presented to the teachers for piloting. So we got the best of the best of the best.
Excellent. And do you know how these programs compare in terms of costs relative to what other folks are offering?
We don't necessarily obtain estimates from the vendors who are not the selected vendors. I would say that we find that they tend to be pretty comparable. If you look at the cost of iReady for K-5 and then the cost of Core, a completely different vendor for 6-8, it's pretty close. If you were to proportion it with the number of students and teachers.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, go for it.
I have a quick question. This program is only for 6 years, and then Is it only for 6 years or
It's-
do?
We are looking at a 6-year adoption. Of
Okay.
course, they would have loved for us to go for 8 or 10 years, but we didn't want to get that far ahead of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
We know that we've been assured
So you're
in our
gonna-
contracts that we will get any updates, as I mentioned before, that are identified based on the California framework whenever that is adopted. We will have those updates. We will use it. We will look at our student data. We will gather input from teachers. And at the end of the 6 years, we'll determine if we want to extend the adoptions or look at something different.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it was keeping up to date with teaching trends and stuff.
Both programs are constantly evolving,
Mhm.
which is also nice for that reason.
Okay, thank you.
I would just add to that comment that this is not a new process for the Santa Maria Bonita School District, especially for our new board members. This process of piloting programs, in whatever curricular area we are looking at, includes teachers and and I can tell you when it began because I was on the very first team that we ever had when we looked at reading and language arts. So what makes this really unusual is the delay in the framework, which is huge. And there continues to be quite a lot of discussion and controversy over several aspects of that. But the fact that you've used an outside agency as, part of the research and as consultant says to me that we've done our due diligence and that we've already, an adoption cycle is generally 7 years. So by about the 5th year, you're already starting to look at, okay, what are the changes that are coming? And you start looking at what new programs are going to come out and what are the changes in the framework. So it has already been delayed. So I, for one, am extremely excited, and the data that you presented indicating those 8 different areas was far more specific than any of the rubrics that had been used in past times. So I know we are getting much more sophisticated.
With
So-
each adoption, we learn something new. We
Right.
reflect and revise
Absolutely.
accordingly. And I really appreciate you calling out. And I want to just add to that, the process that we have in Santa Maria Bonita is not like other districts. In fact, the vendors we've worked with have been quite impressed by the process that we have in our district, how thorough it is, how inclusive it is of the teachers, and how ultimately that teacher voice is what determines the programs that we put forward for board consideration.
Thank you, guys. Obviously it's greatly appreciated the team's work that was put into this, the thoughtfulness and care over time. I had just a couple of questions. One of the slides presented on the K-5 reveal versus iReady, they're broken out into grade levels. It seemed like 5th grade was an outlier, or was that wrong?
5th grade was an outlier. And let me have Nikki actually come back up to the podium and talk a little bit about that.
So we did right away notice that was the case. And so right after we shared the results with our pilotee team, I called the 5th grade in and asked if they would like to meet and say, to put their concerns, to put them out there and to make sure that we were all understanding what the concerns were. We, from there, we created a list of concerns or things that maybe we needed a little bit more training on, and went back to our iReady trainers. And so just last night, the 5th grade pilotees who could make it came, and an iReady representative came, and we sat together and went over and dug in a little bit deeper And because of that, our fifth grade team was feeling a little bit more secure about going forward and working through that program if that were to get recommended.
Awesome. Thank you. And then I was curious, and this is just like a detail thing, but why were there different ends on the selections that you made? So the N was 60 on one thing, it was 15 on another, 10. I mean, so not everybody was participating. How does that work?
You're talking about on the rubric, how different items were weighted differently. Is that what you're speaking to? Let me go back.
When I see an N, I think of it as a sample size. So maybe I'm wrong.
Can you pop it back up there?
I think the N slash in the number showed percentage or sort of points possible.
So an N of 80, N of 10, N of 15, and those are not sample sizes?
So there were 80 points possible in that
Okay.
section, 8 items
Okay.
worth 10 points each.
So it's not an N, like a sample size N. That's all
Right.
I was asking.
Yes.
Because that was what was confusing me.
When we looked at the rubric, there were some things that were more important than other things. All things are important, but the team felt very strongly about weighting some items more than other items.
Makes all kinds of sense now. And I'll forego some of the other questions, but I do want to call out the student ownership and the student self-assessment aspects of this. And then also the quotes that you guys have chosen, because I think it's really important. Mr. Valencia was, I think, in a way addressing this in his concerns or questions regarding whether it was best for our kids. And I think that demonstrates that certainly with their engagement and those responses, that's the case. And so I was really appreciative of that. The definite distinct advantage in the culturally responsive category in the K-5. But also last night we had the facilities master plan steering committee meeting, and we're trying to think about facilities processes that we could change or, structurally and also conceptually. And one of the things that came up was talking about an online academy, or on the option of having a remote learning or online academy. And so I really appreciate the online component, because I know that obviously we're not really talking about it from that standpoint that I'm referencing, but that's a possibility, right? So we have to continue to think about the strength of the online components of all these things, because it's not going to go away. And it may or may not become more and more prevalent and a bigger part of what we do. So I think the fact that was really strong, and that you can see that that's going to continue and get the support, that's really great. So yeah, I think that all was really thoroughly done, and really appreciate your guys' hard work.
Thank you.
I would entertain a motion.
I'll recommend that the Board of Education approve the math adoption as presented.
I'll second.
Been moved by Mr. Lara, seconded by Mrs. Cordero, that the board approve the math adoption as presented. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll move on to item 2B. I think you've kind of already addressed it with the chart. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that with the second chart?
No additional details, just with your approval of these programs, we would also wish that you would approve the contracts so that we can process them immediately in order to ensure that our teachers have the materials in hand before school starts.
And then I would just ask the question of Mr. Beecher, is when we see the numbers that the team put up before us earlier, is that basically coming from the set asides from that where we had our justifications for the set aside, where we would say it was curriculum adoption for such and such?
Correct. That's where the funding will come from.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I will move that we approve the math contracts
And I'll,
as presented.
and I'll second.
Moved by Mrs. Cordero, seconded by Mrs. Corral, that the board approve the math expenditures as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Now you can really clap.
Thank you.
Thank you guys again. We'll move on to item 3A in discussion. Dual language immersion DLI update.
Well, this evening, we are also excited to bring you an update about the DLI program at Jimenez, as well as some recommendations to support our efforts to really intensify and enhance our multilingual programs and services across the district, which is inclusive of the board's desire to consider a DLI expansion. So during the first part of this presentation, you're going to hear from students, parents, teachers, and also Jimenez leadership, Mr. Ruiz. And at this time, I will let him introduce the classes that will be coming to the front of the room to kick off this presentation.
Buenas noches a todos, padres.
Buenas
Buenas
noches.
noches, gracias por asistir. Y a todas las mamás, feliz Día de las Madres. Gracias. Today we have a wonderful presentation for you all. And we're going to start with our first grade DLI classes, doing a little song for you all. And it's Señora González and Señora Peterson's class singing Mami, te traigo estas flores. Go round and up.
Their suits. I'd say they have those because they made their first communion. But I don't- They're so big and true. This is two classes.
Tal vez duren solo un día o a lo mucho, pero como de la calle, no tendría miedo siempre que estuvieras tú en mi corazón, pero igual te quiero más para siempre.
Padres, muchas gracias. Los agradecemos. Wow, that's a tough act to follow.
Then that only gets you your next slide.
Once again, that was our first grade DLI classes, Miss Peterson y la señora González.
I didn't realize there were 400 kids in first grade.
What was that?
So I didn't realize there were 400 kids in first grade,
Right? Wonderful.
and all 1,000 of their parents are with them. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Start. Here we go. Well, not yet, because it's going to be a while for them to go. Once again, I am el señor Ruiz, director de la Escuela Jiménez, y la señora.
Yo soy la señora Herrera. I'm Mrs. Herrera. I'm the assistant principal, soy la subdirectora.
We're going to take you on a little journey, so bear with us. In the beginning, wow, could you believe it's been 8 years? So it's crazy. It's been a fun ride. And it all started because members of our community wanted to introduce children to various cultures and languages. And they formed a coalition that did a lot of research, researched different DLI programs, which was the 50-50, the 90-10 and others. And we got the help from Rosa Molina, and she came and they did a presentation for the board members. They came back, did another presentation, and the third time it was a charm. So the board unanimously approved for a DLI school to be started, or I should say a strand. And I was fortunate enough to be starting off as the administrator at Jimenez Elementary, and Jimenez Elementary was selected as the school to have a DLI strand. This was in 2015. We opened with 2 kinder classes. We had hired teachers from kinder all the way through 3rd grade. We only had 1 teacher that was slated for 3rd grade, and it was a journey and it was a process. Each kindergarten class starts with 30 students. We decided as a group and as team members and as a district with under the direction of Phil Alvarado that we would have 30 students to these classes. And actually, we were over the limit that most kindergarten classes started at, but our teacher said, it's okay, we'll start with 30. At the time, it was very difficult because we embarked on this journey not really knowing what to expect or what we were getting ourselves into. We were all on board and we were all ready to take this voyage, but it was difficult. We did not have a curriculum. Our teachers had no formal training for DLI, and we quickly attended a single conference, and August was before us and we were hitting the door running. So it was an interesting journey. We currently still do PD for our teachers, especially our incoming teachers who have never taught, and we want them to hit that door running, like I said. And we offer ATDLE conferences. We offer CABE. Currently, we have been working with CABE the last couple of years, and they have been our partners in this journey and in this learning. So we do provide PD. It's unfortunate, though, that this is the only formal training that they have been receiving. And it's a great place to not only make contacts and listen to others who have been in this journey for a lot longer than we have, but it's also a place where they make connections and they reach out to these various teachers, districts, in order to help us be the best that we can be here, Santa Maria Bonita. Hiring highly qualified teachers has been a challenge. We've been fortunate here at Santa Maria that we do have a lot of teachers that do have their bilingual credentials, and we are working in partnership with Cal Poly, but still we struggle to hire highly qualified teachers that speak the language at the academic rigor that is needed in order to have a sustainable program. Where are we now?
So where we are, we're at K7. So our first class is in the 7th grade. We have 16 classrooms, and we have our first DLI TOSA that joined Jimenez team in December. Eighth grade, we're going to be adding in the next school year, the 2 additional teachers in the DLI program because our seventh grade, our first class is moving up to eighth. So here's a table that shows the enrollment. So you can see it. You can see it by subgroups. And Ms. Grock will take over this time.
Yay, data. So this is our current enrollment, and we've tried to establish for you a comparison between SMBSD as a whole, our 20 other schools. And then Jimenez, of course, has a strand of DLI and a strand of not DLI. So we're showing you the eligibility and enrollment for the non-DLI students who are similar to getting a similar course offering to the other 20 schools, and then the DLI. So you can see here that there are very strong differences between the percentages of enrollment in all our schools, including Jimenez non-DLI and Jimenez DLI. And what we know is that student groups that typically underperform when compared to their peers, according to this chart, are in almost all instances showing lower enrollment at Jimenez. So by that, I mean, statistically, we expect students with disabilities, second language learners, socioeconomically disadvantaged students to overall perform with less proficiency. And we also know that there are protective factors that tend to increase a student's rate of proficiency. So those protective factors include the parent education level and the students who are not socioeconomically disadvantaged. So we wanted to show you that chart of enrollment, and that is as of April 28th of this year. And then same chart for you that disaggregates the language learner status across those fields. And we refer to never EL and ever EL. So never EL are students who are English only or who IFEP'd on their very first attempt at the LPAC, which basically, according to the state, means they came in prior to any formal education in the system and were fluent in English, even if they were a second language speaker. Whereas ever EL includes all of our EL students, including those who have been RFEP'd. So you could have dual language proficiency in either of those groups, depending on where you come from or how you're progressing. But the disaggregation of data from this point forward refers to never EL and ever EL in those two categories. And of course, the makeup of the DLI strand, the target was 50-50, 50% EOs and IFEPs, 50% ELs. And then we've broken it down for you by ethnicity and race, Hispanic, not Hispanic, and then within the not Hispanic group, what their identified ethnicity and race is, and then home language as well.
I think they wanted you to slow down the interpretation.
Oh,
services.
I do that all the time. Who's next? Oh,
Thank you. Next slide is discussing attrition. And we really don't have much attrition prior to having our 7th and 8th grade students in housed at our school. What's happening right now is most of the attrition that has happened in the past was because students would move, their parents would get a different job out of town. So our students would obviously follow their parents. And when students moved across town, when they were Jimenez students, and parents couldn't provide transportation for them. Now that we've become a TK8 school, some of our students and families are deciding that they want their children to have that junior high experience, especially when it comes to sports and having that opportunity to rotate classrooms so they're better prepared for the high school, because some of these parents want to make sure that their kids have every advantage when they get to high school. And so we've been losing students to that. But other than that, we really do not lose students. We continue to search for the best curriculum possible for our students. And we've done so in the past. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of collaboration so we can have the best curriculum possible for our students. We focus on key driver number 1, the right people in doing the right work. And we feel like we do have the right people doing the right work. Every member of Jimenez School and also our DLI instructors, they work extremely hard. They work extra long hours to make sure that they provide the very, very best for all students. We continue to look for highly qualified teachers to make sure that we are seeking them and hiring them for our district and also for Jimenez School. Looking for those bilingual credentials, because some of you are very aware that just because you have a bilingual credential doesn't make you fully qualified to be a DLI instructor. I am living proof of that. I say I can't pass. I probably couldn't teach past second grade because I'm not as fluent as I should be, but I do my very best. And we're always seeking for those people who have that academic register, because that's what is needed in order to be a DLI instructor. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I'm doing great. This year, we were fortunate enough that we are able to have a DLI coach. We would really appreciate having a full-time DLI coach at site because we really find it difficult to share. And we're sharing with the district, and we're making baby steps, but we're really hoping to get a full-time DLI coach. So this individual could really coach not only our teachers, but work alongside them and work with students so we could have that outcome that we desire and that our students deserve. We continue, like I said, to partner with GABE, and we definitely worked on that with translanguaging and bridging. That's one of the things that we really focused on. And we continue to develop capacity in our PLC process. And I know that's across the whole district, but we are really making every attempt to make sure that not only do our teachers understand the PLC process, but they're applying those best tiered instructions in the classroom. Moving forward, we're going to continue to hold students to high standards. We want them to obtain their seal of biliteracy, continue to partnership with GABE to support professional learning, and Jimenez DLI team will make a plan for how to increase parent involvement. And actually, we have a great parent involvement component at our school. We lost it a little during the COVID years, but it's coming back and we're hitting that road running, and we can't wait to see where we go. Next will be a couple of our DLI teachers are going to be sharing a little bit about their experience. We have El Señor Joaquin, our kinder teacher. We have La Señora Chavez, our fourth grade teacher. And we also have La Señora Caro, who is also a fourth grade teacher.
Good evening. I am Yesenia Chavez. I'm a fourth grade teacher at Jimenez Elementary School. I am excited to be here and share with you some of the successes of our program. First, I want to share about the program success each of our students has experienced. Our students are placed in a rigorous environment where they are asked to understand knowledge in not one but two languages. Their success in understanding and learning both languages has boosted their self-esteem and academic success. They feel confident in learning new content because they have experienced success in learning every step of the way since kinder. Second, the family community that is created in a dual language classroom is like no other. These groups of students have struggled together, overcome language barriers together. They have been challenged side by side. Every day, I see them supporting one another, molding to each other's learning styles, and being kind human beings. Lastly, I come with one big suggestion, and that is the request for additional supports. Our teachers and students need additional support such as speech and resource and intervention, just like our English-only classrooms. I truly appreciate getting that DLI coach, and the help that she has provided so far has been tremendous. Thank you so much for your time.
La Señora Caro.
Hi, good afternoon. So I'll be giving my experience as a parent of DLI children. So I have a 6th grade daughter and a 4th grade son. And within this program, my children have developed their leadership skills and abilities. My oldest daughter is now in 6th grade and she is part of the school leadership team. My 4th grade son participates in band and they're always seeking out opportunities at home and in their community. Being in this program has helped them gain essential skills to thrive in a diverse world. Both of my children are interested in attending college, and my 6th grader wants a career where her bilingual skills are valued. Parent involvement and commitment. So the initial meetings helped me understand what the program consists of. And as a parent, I have responsibilities and a commitment to follow the program to its entirety. Suggestions that I have, intervention such as speech and resource in designated language, and support from district with knowledgeable coaches and professional development. Thank you.
Kinder, Señor Joaquín.
Hola, buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everybody. As you see, we have 7th graders. That means me as a kinder teacher, I have been here for 8 years. I've been able to see these students grow. I've been able to get to know families, get to know siblings, cousins, and it's been a miraculous journey. Through my experience, I've been able to see what is science. We know that students learn language over time, but it feels magical. And that magic has been having students with me that were apprehensive about speaking English, were apprehensive about speaking Spanish. And as they've grown in their language. My niece is a 2nd grader in this program. She started during the COVID year. This was a niece that said she didn't want to speak Spanish. She only wanted to speak English, and she fought me on that. Now, as a 2nd grader, she switches between English and Spanish better than I do. And that's the magic as an uncle, as a teacher. I'm proud to watch them all grow. I have many students here that have just grown and blossomed in ways that I couldn't imagine. And some of them are already taller than me, so that hurts a little bit. But it's been a process that I have thoroughly enjoyed. That process has been able to happen because we have dedicated teachers, we have dedicated students, we have dedicated parents, we have dedicated administrators that have worked to follow the fidelity of this program. Following this program is not easy. It is the diet and exercise of language acquisition. You're not going to do it in 1 year. You're not going to do it in 2 years. You have to be okay with working hard. You have to be okay with being uncomfortable, because accepting that you don't know a certain language is hard. It's hard for children. It's hard for us as adults. That means in order for it to be successful, it must be implemented correctly. That means that teachers are willing to follow the language models that they need to. The students are willing to work hard. The parents are willing to follow through with the program. They're not just going to stay for a year or two. Their students are in. So a suggestion that I have, seeing this program follow through, knowing all the hard work that we do, I suggest that if this is to grow, which I want it to, whether it's at our school, whether it's in another school, if it's to grow, it must be done correctly. It's not done just to say we have it, but it's done with the right teachers that are willing to speak both languages. It's done with families that are willing to commit and to know it's going to be hard taking on a second language. It's done with administrators who are willing to support those teachers. Those are the things that have made us successful, will continue to make us successful, and make DLI throughout Santa Maria successful in the future. Thank you.
Y la señora González, 1st grade.
Good evening. I'm very happy to be here, especially with our parent support, with our students coming in. And I was very happy to present the first year I was with dual language 7 years ago. We came in and we sang for the board. Now here we are again singing to the board. I'm very pleased. I've been teaching 1st grade with our district for 26 years. And as a first grade teacher, one of my goals is to have students read and enjoy literacy. Doing so in 2 languages is fabulous. And that is a blessing to be able to do that, to help students do that. In the past 8 years, I see the way students are engaged with each other, not only wanting the academics, but also the social, learning the language, learning the culture, being happy with who they are and what they're learning. It's very powerful for them to be able to communicate in the playground and also in the classroom, whether it be with the rigorous curriculum we have, helping one another be successful. Earlier this year, we had the opportunity for first grade to have full-time instructional assistants. I was very happy. I'm very happy with that change. That's helped me where I no longer feel I am doing a bulk of the work. I have an assistant who is biliterate, highly qualified, and is very engaged also with the students, wanting them to succeed. They see the way she comes out and helps them. So hiring the correct people is very important, and working together. We have a wonderful community at Jimenez, but it's taken some time to be able to develop that community with the support of administration, staff, as well as our parents. And we do have to include our parents because they are, as we know, very critical in our program. The parent commitment is very important. Since this is a choice program, parents have to have an understanding of what it takes to be in the program. Not only are they academically, but socially involved in that process. Time is needed to learn a language, and permanency in the program is a must. Students are not to be moved from school to school. Sometimes when we don't see quick results, parents tend to want to move their children. We need to make sure that students are given that time to learn the language. Remembering that we are striving towards the seal of biliteracy. I hope in the future we continue to benefit from dual language, and I could only hope that all my students and the students in our district could strive towards learning 2 languages. I don't know how our program will look in the future, but what I do know is that we do need to be careful when implementing any form of expansion. We need to consider our current needs, and those needs might change from time to time. And I do believe we can move forward with a concentration of teachers, training, resources, and services in one central location rather than watering down programs. So going from school to school rather than working on one solid school, regardless of the location, is important. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Parent highlights. Here's some of the activities that we've had at Jimenez. And like I said, we have a very involved community. We have parents who are constantly bringing their children to any event that we hold there at Jimenez. And we're very grateful because we love our kids and we want our kids to continue to grow and feel at home at our school site. So one of the, where's Sam? Mr. Duarte? One eye. One eye. Wow. Yeah, I have on my phone. Good evening, everyone. My name is Samuel Duarte, and I have two boys, 7th grade, 5th grade, attending the program, LI. And I'd like to touch on some advantages for us for this program. And one of them is a pride for our language, right? Not feeling ashamed and having a sense of empowerment, right? Unlike my generation. And part of that empowerment is being able to compete in a global economy. So I think that that is a huge advantage. Also, being open to cultural curiosity. It really fosters cultural sensitivity to other cultures. Our boys are currently learning Mandarin as well. And so being able to understand culture through language is huge. Establishing strong friendships. Someone mentioned, having a cohort go through this program is just a beautiful thing to see. And as well as, building that relationship with parents as well. It's a huge advantage for our boys. So that's the parent component. And one of my, the one I love the most is really the ability to communicate with family, uncles. When I see them communicate with my parents, with our parents, it's a beautiful thing to see, right? The stories are not diluted, their experiences are shared. And so it's just, it's a beautiful way to communicate in their own language. And one of our requests is to expand the program. Every year, there's so much demand, and there are many parents who are left out, many children who are left out of this beautiful program. And so that would be our request. And also to make a full DLI program through one of our schools. That would be pretty amazing. So yeah, hopefully we can give an opportunity to more students in our community and more families. Thank you very much. El Señor de la Paz.
Oh my God. Hello, everyone. My name is Marcos de la Paz, and I'm a proud parent of a DLI student at Jimenez Elementary School. And I would like to talk about the importance of for our daughter to be able to be bilingual and communicate in both languages. Our goal was always to have her be bilingual and be able to communicate with our parents, because they only speak Spanish, and we have family back in Mexico that we want her to be able to communicate with them without any lost communication translation, without any issues. But we also wanted her to be able to communicate in English and continue her school in English, so she wouldn't have the struggles that we had going to school, learning a subject in a second language. So to me, it's also very important not to have not just the speaking part, but also learning our culture, because this might be funny or silly, but to me, it was very important for her to understand my jokes when I talked to her, because a lot of those jokes, they come from my culture and the way that I was raised. So I want her to be able to understand them, and she does. She also brings her own jokes, and we have fun in that, and that's priceless to me. I want her to be able to feel comfortable speaking to her parents, and comfortable, and also feel comfortable enough that she can connect with them, and also respect them and understand them. So we felt very lucky that we were able to find this program, the DLI program, but also lucky that we were able to get in the program, because it was not easy just to go in and sign up. So we came to the first orientation, and we fell in love with it. The goals, the plans and everything. And through the last 7 years that we've been in the school, we've seen sometimes the school struggle to keep going because the lack of supplies, the lack of teachers. But we saw how hard the staff worked. Mr. Reese worked to make it move forward with the help of teachers, the students, the staff, and the parents. So I believe, and I want to say that it's moving forward, it's getting better, and I hope we continue in that path. I am a contractor, and I can see that being bilingual every day, I can see how beneficial it is for me that I can communicate with employees, vendors, other contractors, suppliers. And sometimes, even though we both speak English, just knowing that we know Spanish, we have that extra connection, or we can communicate better with them. And sometimes I go to other contractors and I get asked, "Hey, Marcos, can you help me translate? This client is asking for something and I don't know what to say." So that's when I remove my glasses, open my shirt, and show my SB of super bilingual, and and I help them out. And that, to me, that's a weapon that I have that I want to share with everybody, and all the kids that I see in this program. They have it, and that's a blessing to me. So I can see at my level of work, at my trade, how beneficial this is. So I can only imagine once these our kids go to their final career, doctors, engineers, teachers, how beneficial it's going to be for them. So I think that that's very important. And I can only imagine in a few years, one of those kids sitting one of those tables, on one of those chairs. So that'll be amazing. And why not one of our kids being a superintendent? Imagine how beautiful or grateful it's going to be if that kid or that superintendent be able to communicate with our kids, our parents and grandparents in their own language, in their own culture. That'll be priceless to me. So I believe that knowledge brings common sense and dialogue and respect and peace. Being exposed to other cultures makes you understand the person better, and it gives you an idea of how to approach, how to communicate with them. When I was asked to do this talk, I said, "Sign me up. I'm eager to go there and promote and sell this program." And I asked, "So this is for the new parents for next year?" And they said, "No, it's for the boards." Like, wait a minute, this is the wrong crowd. And the reason I say that, because you have chosen a career in education, promoting knowledge and all that stuff. So let me tell you, this program is at the next level, and I can see it in my daughter and our kids. So like my daughter says, this is a 1,000,000% good for our kids, for our community. And I believe that our future leaders, if we can prepare them in bilingual, it'll be a better world. Thank you.
Mr. Restrepo?
Good evening, board members. I'm sorry if I am a little bit discombobulated, but I was just next door making the Spanish presentation for the DLI program prospective parents. I did put some notes down because I was very concerned about Richard. He's always very concerned when I stand in public and he doesn't know what I'm going to say. And he's always worried that I'm going to speak for 35 to 40 minutes and put everybody. Yeah. So my name is Alberto Restrepo. Let me begin telling you who I am. I'm a professor of sociology and race and ethnic relations at Allen Hancock College. I've been involved with the DLI program since before it started. I've also had the privilege to travel with Richard looking at programs in Oxnard, Ontario. We've looked at programs everywhere. I think I served with Linda in the DLI task force for the district several years ago. I mentioned my occupation only because I've been very fortunate to be able to spend the last 8 years not only experiencing the DLI program, but actually doing research, academic research on DLI, learning about DLI, and becoming very familiar with bilingual programs. Um, but first and foremost, I am a parent of 2 kids in the DLI program. They're up there in the picture, and one of my kids will be speaking later on. Miles will be up here. One is a 12-year-old, and he's in 7th grade, which means that he was part of the original cohort when the program began. And my other kid is Harper, and she's 10 years old. She's in 4th grade. A lot of the things that I have to say have already been said. And that's part of the reason why Richard schedules me at the end. It's purely strategic. He knows that everything has been said and I'll probably shut up. I was just talking to parents, to the Spanish speaking parents who want to get their kids in the program. And the first thing that I said to them is, DLI programs, all the research shows that DLI programs work incredibly well, not only for the bilingualism and biliteracy that we're all interested in, but DLI programs work really well in closing learning gaps, socioeconomic gaps, and they also work really well on academic excellency. There's one caveat, and you can look at the research, and it's the DLI programs when they are well-designed DLI programs. And we have seen many DLI programs in our travels that are just okay. We have seen some very good ones, but we have seen some that are not so good. My experience as a parent is, and I think that many of the parents preceding me spoke about this, is that the DLI program at Jimenez has been nothing but a positive experience for me. The commitment of teachers and administrators to the program has been incredible. I think that at times they're the ones keeping the program afloat. So, as everybody would expect me to do, and you've heard millions of times, I know this program needs support. The second component of the success of this program has been parental involvement. Everybody talks about parental involvement, but at Jimenez, maybe partly because it's an elective program, it's a program of choice. We have tremendous parental involvement. I have removed myself a little bit because I have other professional obligations, but since the outset at Jimenez, the parents established a PTC. We created a nonprofit corporation, incorporated with the state of California. We run our own finances. We run we run all the programs, basically fundraising programs at the school, and we have control of the money. And that has not only given us a sense of involvement, but a sense of empowerment. Right? Richard is always asking the PTC for money. So yeah, I have nothing negative to say, but I will say this. My kids are in 7th and 4th grade. It's going to be no time since they are out of the program. And I've been thinking a lot about this. We have committed, some of us have committed insane amount of times to this school. I know it sounds kind of pretentious to say this, but I want to know what is the legacy that we're going to leave behind to future parents. And I would phrase this in terms of my wish list. And I will only say one thing. I only have one wish. And if I could have done things differently, is that my kids had gone to a DLI school and not to a DLI strand. I don't know how possible something like that is, but the reason for that is that when you experience a DLI school, you really have total immersion. When you have a DLI strand where only 1/3 of the school is DLI, kids spend a lot of time in the classroom with fabulous teachers learning the language and acquiring the skills. And then they go into recess, and recess is a code switch. Immediately, everything switches into English. The people who are supervising the students, what do you call them? The monitors? Huh?
Student supervision.
The supervisioning people are speaking to the kids in English. And that has an effect in terms of immersion. My kids are growing up in a household where the main language is English. And while my kids' proficiency in bilingualism is good and their literacy skills in reading are really high, I sort of wish that that full immersion would have taken place. That's not meant as a criticism, but I think that that's really important. Also, I've spent many years talking and fighting with Richard about all kinds of things. And one of the things that I see is that a principal who has a strand of a DLI program in a school that's not a DLI program has the attention divided. And when it comes to things like substitutes and things like that, his main priority has to be the main school. And this could have an effect on our programs. Our programs sort of become an appendage to a school. So I'll just conclude by saying that that would be my wish if my kids are going to be gone. But if we could have a DLI school, that would be fantastic. And we're seeing that pattern happen everywhere. Santa Barbara just opened McKinley and opened a full DLI school. And that's the best schools that we visited were DLI schools. So that would be, how long was that? All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for listening.
Next, our wonderful students. As you could see, we're constantly trying to outdo ourselves. We're very fortunate that part of these students were on the volleyball team and they brought home the win, so we're excited about that. But here we go. Un aplauso, un aplauso. How do I play this video?
So first, we're going to introduce our students. They were recorded in first grade. I'm like, how old were you? First grade. And then they'll speak. So first we'll hear them. And then
Krishna.
So this is Krishna.
Hablar en hindi como alguien viene querida y también cuando alguien no puedo hablar en español. También estoy feliz porque como yo hindi puedo hablar Creo hablar hindi en India y también estoy feliz porque como hablo inglés con mis padres, lo puedo decir también en español si quieren aprender español.
Hi, my name's Krishna, and I've been in the dual immersion program. This is my seventh year, and my primary language that I speak at home and normally is English. And the dual immersion program has helped me learn a second language. And for the last 7 years, I've enjoyed this program because it has been challenging every year and has taught me to overcome language barriers. Being bilingual has allowed me to make bonds with kids that I would not have been able to if I was not fluent in Spanish. And the dual immersion program has also helped me expand my options for jobs and has made me a more valuable asset to my community. When I travel to Spanish-speaking countries, I'm able to understand and speak their language to be able to connect with the people there. En conclusión, el programa de Dual Immersion ayúdame y muchos de mis compañeros conectar en manera no podemos sin el Dual Immersion programa. Yo quiero que este programa continúe para los niños, niñas en el futuro, porque el programa Dual Immersion ayuda y enseña cómo hablar, escribir y leer en un segundo lenguaje. Thank you.
Next is Sophia. So again, I'll show the video and then the student will come up to speak.
Yo soy muy orgullosa que yo estoy bilingüe, porque por si acaso en recreo yo encuentro una amiga o amigo que sabe puro inglés, yo le puedo decir y contestar las cosas en inglés, y si sabe español, yo le contesto y le digo las cosas en español. Porque estuviera curioso que yo estuviera diciendo en otro idioma y ella en otra, y no pudiéramos saber quién está hablando de qué, y nomás viéndonos como no es algo normal.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sofia de la Paz. I'm a sixth grade student at the Jimenez Elementary School, and I'm very proud and grateful to be in the dual immersion program. You may ask why. Well, that's because I speak both English and Spanish. At the beginning of this journey, I was only comfortable with speaking Spanish, but now I also speak English. Over the years, I've been able to incorporate English into my life, and now I am fluent in both languages. This has given me the opportunity to help people. I'm with my grandma almost every single day, and I've been able to help her translate important documents and conversations. Also, as a biliterate person, I have future advantages like applying for jobs, entering high school, college, and universities, because it is much more likely for them to hire someone that is fluent in English and Spanish. The dual immersion program has taught us to set a higher standard than the English-only class because we're learning and taking tests in both languages. It's been very motivating seeing other kids grow since the kindergarten and see how much they've learned and improved. I personally have the desire to learn a third language, and thanks to the program, it's much easier too. As we have done so many presentations in both languages and in many different subjects that include main ideas, details, pictures, fun facts, vocabulary words, and more, I've gained more confidence to talk in front of people and present my ideas. I hope that you guys learned more about this amazing program. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, Naomi, so I'll start with the video.
Me siento muy orgulloso de ser bilingüe de los idiomas porque si alguien no sabe inglés o no sabe español, yo puedo hablar con ellos, o si alguien quiere hablar español y no sabe o inglés, pues yo puedo decir cómo hablar y ayudarles a aprender a hablar en inglés o español.
Hola, mi nombre es Naomi
Y te voy a hablar de por qué me gusta que mi escuela me da la oportunidad de aprender español. Por saber español, puedo tener ventajas en el futuro. Por ejemplo, si quiero agarrar un trabajo por una compañía, algo que pueden ver es que soy bilingüe y biletrado. Eso me podría ayudar a agarrar un trabajo de allí y eso me podría ayudar de hacer eso. Otro ejemplo es si quiero ir a la universidad. La universidad puede ver que sé hablar en 2 idiomas y eso me ayudaría a entrar a su escuela. Saber 2 idiomas es un regalo y no todas las personas pueden tenerlo. Mi escuela me ha dado la oportunidad excelente que mis padres no podían dar y estoy muy agradecida por eso. Algo más que puedo beneficiar de saber 2 idiomas es que puedo hacer conexiones culturales con muchas más personas y lugares. Por ejemplo, si voy a un lugar que nomás saben español, puedo hablar con las personas de ahí y conectar con ellos y su cultura. Ya sé que muchas personas sé hablar inglés, pero puedo hablar con más fluidez con ellos si hablo en su primer idioma. Cuando tienes que aprender un nuevo idioma es muy difícil. Como muchas cosas, cuando lo aprendes por la primera vez es difícil, pero ya que empecé con cosas difíciles en una edad muy temprano, ya sé cómo superar cosas difíciles. Por ejemplo, eso me ayuda a aprender cosas nuevas en la escuela y deportes. Para añadir, aprender otro idioma antes me ayuda a aprender una nueva idioma. Por ejemplo, si quiero ir a Francia y aprender francés, va a ser más fácil. Al saber 2 idiomas, puedo ayudar a otras personas. Por ejemplo, mi papá fue a Zimbabue y ahí ayudó a niños que vivían ahí. Si sabía la primera idioma de esos niños, podía ayudarlos mejor. Además, si yo termino con un trabajo en ayudar a personas, puedo ayudar a más personas porque sé 2 idiomas y puedo hablar con personas que no más saben inglés o si no más saben español. Como puedes ver, saber 2 idiomas tiene posibilidades que no son limitadas. Me da beneficios y no tengo límites para viajar, superar problemas, hacer conexiones o para ayudar a otras personas. Como puedes ver, saber 2 idiomas es un beneficio que mi escuela me podía dar y estoy muy agradecida. Deseo que aprendices más sobre este programa. Gracias por tu tiempo.
Okay, next I'll have Miles.
Estoy feliz porque todas las otras escuelas de Santa María no te enseñan español y estoy orgulloso de ser bilingüe.
Good evening, board. My name is Miles Restrepo, and I've been a student and part of the DLI program since the very beginning. I was part of the first cohort, and I think that it's, first of all, just amazing that this is something that is offered to people, because the first bullet point, communication. I have family that lives in Colombia, a different country, and the main language that they speak is Spanish. And now that I'm able to fluently speak another language, I'm able to communicate with them way easier. And just like stories that they've told me, I'm able to understand it. The second point is success. And I think this is a point that has been said so many times, but it's just like so important. And it's just so true that learning another language and being able to speak 2 languages just gives you the upper hand. It just gives you so many more opportunities. Like a story that I've been told by my teacher is that her mom was competing for a job against a much younger lady, and like the lady was much more qualified for the job, but was unable to speak Spanish. And her mom was able to speak Spanish, and she received the job solely because of her ability to speak Spanish. I think that's a story that can be applied to all of us, and it's just very important. The third bullet point is confidence. And that is something that is very, very important for me personally, because I've struggled with confidence in the past, but being able to know that I can speak another language is just really motivating and gives me confidence, knowing that I'm able to communicate with people and that I have the chance for bigger success than others who might not have had this opportunity that I do. And the fourth bullet point is helping others, which has also been brought up many, many times. But just being able to help other people is also a very important part of who I am. And the fact that I'm able to help others who might not be able to understand is so reassuring for me. A story that I have about this is my grandma who lives here, she only speaks English, and she had hired people to help with her house, and they only spoke Spanish. And she needed someone to help translate what they were saying to her. And I happened to be there and I was able to help her out. And I think that's just amazing. And that's a great opportunity that is able to be presented to all of us. Thank you for your time, board.
These youngsters are amazing. Thank you.
Estoy feliz porque todas las otras escuelas de Santa María no te enseñan español.
Oops, did we go back to the beginning? Thank you.
Wow, that was amazing. So obviously the qualitative data says that DLI programs are working, and the payoff for the community, for the students, for the parents is incredible. The question that board member Cordero asked at one point is it working? And I think, yes, it is, but we also have to look at quantitative data.
Excuse me, young man, the first one that spoke, Krishna. I watched your video over and over, and that's awesome that you're trilingual and it's you understand both sides and you've taken the part of learning the DLI and the Spanish, and I give you props on that. That's awesome.
So in addition to the qualitative data, we want to look at quantitative data, and that's what I'm here to present. So we start by looking at our LPAC performance for those of our DLI students who are language learners. Obviously, those who are never ELs do not take the LPAC. But for our DLI students compared to our SMBSD non-DLI students, the LPAC performance is closely aligned in trends as a whole. Remember that regardless of the grade level, the goal is an LPAC level 4 or well-developed. And also remember that RFEP students no longer take the test, which makes this a moving target, and it makes comparisons group to group and year to year very difficult. Because once you get an LPAC 4, then you qualify for redesignation, then you never take the LPAC again. And so it's a constantly moving target. But you can see that our performance is closely aligned between the DLI students and the non-DLI students. This is the same data disaggregated by grade level, and we continue to see the mirroring of DLI students' performance to SMBSD as a whole. So the blue line is DLI students, the gray line is SMBSD non-DLI students. And while there appears to be a jump to higher performance in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, we must also note that the size of these cohorts is statistically insignificant, less than 30, and would not be reported at all on state reporting pages as a group size of 30 is required. Then we look at SBAC ELA achievement levels. So first we look at students who are English learners. The DLI students at Jimenez, Ever ELs are on the left, and the non-DLI SMBSD students, Ever ELs, is on the right. So remember, as I said before, that Ever EL does include RFEP students as well. These EL students in DLI outperform non-DLI students on the ELA SBAC at a rate of 31 to 24% who are meeting or exceeding standards. Next, we look at never EL students. So those are students who are either English only or who IFEP'd the very first time that they took the LPAC, which was usually in TK or kindergarten. DLI students who are never EL outperform or perform at higher rates of standard achievement than non-DLI, non-EL students at a rate of 42 to 34%. This same data viewed in a disaggregated by grade report shows us that the trends in achievement are mirrored for our English learners, so that while DLI ever ELs perform at slightly higher percentages, the trend increase is consistent to SMBSD ever ELs. However, we see significant differences when comparing DLI never ELs, the gray line, with SMBSD never ELs, the yellow line. In this comparison, DLI students are outpacing non-DLI students, but we must again note that the size of most of the DLI cohorts is statistically insignificant when below 30 and significantly smaller than the SMBSD group, even when above 30. So that 5th grade spike isn't quite as dramatic as it appears. Next, we look at our MAP growth, our local benchmark assessment administered 3 times a year. This is the data from winter of this year. So here we see again that ever EL students in DLI programs perform slightly better than ever ELs in SMBSD. 8% more had growth, 6% more had adequate growth, and 3% more had achievement. This pattern is seen in even slightly stronger terms with the never ELs in DLI and versus in SMBSD. 10% more DLI growth, 21% more adequate growth, and 11% more achievement. This is the California Spanish assessment performance. This test is taken by, it's available to any student in the district. It is one of the requirements for the seal of biliteracy, and most students at Jimenez take it. Regardless of the grade level, the goal in CSA is a range of 3, which is labeled by the state as the student can consistently do these things in Spanish. The CSA measures Spanish reading, language arts skills, specifically in reading, writing, mechanics, and listening. Students in DLI, regardless of their native language, perform quite consistently on the exam. And while the CSEA is available to all SMBSD students as an optional test, only a few students in SMBSD outside of the DLI program completed this exam. So we have no comparison to non-DLI for you on this one. So then turning our attention to math, we look at the SBAC math performance. Performance for ever ELs, both in DLI and not, are virtually trending the same, 17% and 14% at or exceeding. However, DLI students who are never ELs perform at somewhat higher rates of standard achievement than non-DLI, non-EL students at a rate of 31% proficient versus district-wide 23%. While the overall percentage of students at or exceeding are much lower in math than in ELA overall, these are the same proportionality trends that we saw in English language arts a few slides ago. When viewed in a disaggregated by grade report, we see that the trends in achievement are not mirrored as they were in ELA. Now we see significant differences when comparing DLI never ELs, the gray line, with SMBSD never ELs, the yellow line. In this comparison, DLI students are outpacing non-DLI students in grades 3 through 5. We must note again that the size of most of the DLI cohorts is statistically insignificant when below 30 and is significantly smaller than the SMBSD groups even when above 30. But these are, all of these groups up to 6th grade are over 30 in the DLI ever EL count. Turning to math performance on our local assessment, here we see that EL trends appear to be very similar regardless of DLI or non-DLI program. while DLI students do perform slightly stronger in growth and adequate growth. For our never ELs, we see the same trend, slightly stronger performance by DLI students than across SMBSD as a whole. That was a lot of data. So the question is, are we seeing expected student outcomes? And I do have to call out that our data is only reporting results for students through grade 6 and then local benchmarks through mid-year of 7th grade. So if we look at the expected outcomes based on research, the Thomas and Collier research from 2000 to 2019, what we're looking at is the teal colored or like blue line. That would be the DLI students. That's two-way bilingual education. And the red line straight across is native English speakers. So if you think about what I was talking about with ever ELs versus never ELs, this is the expected outcomes based on meta-analysis. If your eye travels up from the 6, you'll see that right there in 6th grade is when the two-way bilingual education and the native English speakers converge. And then we expect bilingual students to begin to outpace that arc. We are on the cusp of that data reporting. And based on the data that I've given to you today, I do expect to see those continued really positive outcomes. So at grade 6, the two-way bilingual education students are expected to perform at the same levels. And overall, we see this trend in our data at this time. And by 8th grade, the DLI students are expected to outperform EOs. We don't have that data yet for comparison, but I do expect it to be very, very positive. We do need to just remember that all of this data is only up to 6th grade. But I think if I had to answer Board Member Cordero's question in one go, is it working? Yes. Quantitatively, the data is showing us that this is a phenomenal program for native English speakers and a really strong program for native Spanish speakers as well. And if those trends continue, we'll continue to see that success. And at this point, I'm going to continue to reference expected student outcomes, but I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Loftus.
Thank you. And it's because of those expected student outcomes that the DLI program at Jimenez was designed the way it has been designed. There are, as was shared earlier, different versions of DLI programs, but we can see on the chart that the two-way DLI program is going to reap the highest results. We have, however, been talking about and have a desire to explore what it might mean to expand our DLI program. We've heard a lot of enthusiasm about that from our parents and our students, also our teachers, with a little dose of caution because it's not an easy adventure, but it's definitely one that is worthwhile. In order to dig into what that might look like, we need to first understand what DLI looks like at Jimenez in a two-way DLI program. The program that Jimenez elected to implement is a 90-10 model. What that means is that students in kindergarten spend 90% of their learning day speaking Spanish, the target language, and 10% English. As the students progress up the grade levels, you slowly see that change from 90-10, 80-20, all the way until we get to 5th grade, where students are spending half of their day in English, reading and writing in English, and half of their day reading and writing in Spanish. So what does that look like for a student? What is the student experience? If I'm a student in kindergarten or 1st grade, I have that 90-10 breakdown of my day, and you can see in red the subjects that I should be experiencing solely in Spanish, and the small amount of time that I spend learning in English. As students progress up the grade levels, you'll see additional percentages of minutes in English. So you start to see a little bit less Spanish and a little bit more English, again, until we get to that 50-50 model in 5th grade. Once we hit the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, that middle school or junior high world, if you will, things start to get a little bit more complicated. And what you see outlined on the screen are the recommendations for a two-way DLI program. And what it looks like is if I'm a student in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, a minimum of 2 of my courses must be taught in Spanish. The ultimate goal is 50% English and 50% Spanish, just like what you saw in a 5th grade year. Keeping in mind that regardless of the ending percentage, I must have English, my ELA instruction in English, and I must also have my language arts instruction provided in Spanish. The second class that must also be in the target language needs to be in a content area, whether that's science, math, or history, needs to be in Spanish. The third class, which we would hopefully always aspire to have, could be an elective, also in the target language. English learners still get ELD, and Spanish learners, those who are learning Spanish, get SLD. If you look at the screen below, you'll see the programs that we've implemented in the last year for the Spanish language arts programs for our 6th, 7th, and now going into 8th grade. You can also see that our students in our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade experience science in Spanish and PE in Spanish. Then they have English, language arts in English, ELD, English, history, and math in English. So they have about a 50% Spanish, 50% English experience during their school day. As shared earlier, the Jimenez model is a two-way model, meaning that half of the students in the program are native English speakers and half of the students are half are native English speakers and half are not. Again, as I hinted at earlier, there are different types of DLI programs. The two-way is the one we've explored deeply tonight, the model at Jimenez, but another program or design for DLI can be one way, where that percentage of 50-50 isn't necessarily the target, and most of the students are speak predominantly the target language, which in our case, would be Spanish. We've talked before what it might look like to expand and areas of consideration. We've heard tonight an interest of expanding the DLI program at Jimenez beyond being just a strand, if you will, occurring at the school site. We've heard requests of students, teachers, parents wanting to see an expansion of DLI into a junior high setting so that a DLI student would experience the same type of experience as a typical junior high student with that DLI component. We've talked about investigating the possibility of DLI programs, either two-way or one-way, being at specific school sites in our district, one per cluster, more, less, depending on what the need is. And we've also spent some time researching and consulting with CABE, who is helping us develop this journey and plan. We've also received some survey feedback from parents. So this is the information that we've been gathering over the last couple of months. Regardless of where we go, the programmatic pieces can easily be designed with the help of DLI teachers, DLI coaches, DLI administrators, but we cannot do it in isolation. You've heard quite a bit about the need to have the right person in the right job and making sure that we have teachers who are able to speak that academic language in Spanish as well as English. And so certainly any expansion would be done in partnership with human resources, and space is always an issue. And so with the master planning and working with business services, we would want to move forward working on this together. When we consider our next steps for exploring expansion, we would partner with CABE in order to have the experts in the room helping us make the best decisions possible for our students. And we would look to put together an action team in the fall of the next school year. That action team would be comprised of the individuals you see on the right-hand side, wanting to make sure that we have representation from all of our different partners in this journey and that all voices are heard and considered as part of what expansion efforts might be put forth for board consideration. Beyond expanding our DLI program, we also want to expand, intensify, enhance, if you will, the supports that we provide for all of our multilingual learners, and that is inclusive of our DLI program. And earlier today, I said that we would have an update on DLI, but also an update on our recommendations for how we can enhance our multilingual programs within the district. What you see on your screen is an image of what we are looking to propose, and that is a reworking of a couple of positions that we already have in place in the district. So what I'm going to describe to you is not about adding new positions. It's about looking at the positions we have currently, rethinking the work, and redefining how we would move forward. So you'll see a coordinator for multilingual services, a program specialist specifically for DLI, and then a migrant educational program director. So let's look just a little bit closer at these three different roles. The multilingual coordinator would be a position that is created by elevating a position that we've had vacant for over a year. We've been looking very hard for a multilingual program specialist. During the time looking for that individual, we've also had a lot of learning, received a lot of feedback, and have an ultimate desire to elevate that position into a coordinator role to help us expand and enhance our programs for students. In a moment, we will go through the job descriptions, but I do want to note that we believe that bilingual is required. Bilingualism should be required for that position, so you'll see that I've noted that there. The DLI program specialist would be a repurposing of the second multilingual program specialist. The vacancy we had in the first column was actually 2 vacancies. We had planned for and hoped for 2. And so rather than continuing to look specifically for a multilingual program specialist, we'd like to really consider a DLI program specialist. The work we have in front of us with the expansion efforts or considerations for DLI will certainly require considerable focus and energy going into that area. And so we'd like to have that expertise helping support that journey. We would have bilingual in the target language, which is Spanish, as preferred. For this lower level administrative role, we would want to cast a really wide net. And while the target language is actually preferred, we may find somebody who doesn't have the target language. It might be a different language. It might be only English, but they still have that specialization and would be able to fulfill that role. The third column is the Migrant Ed Program Director. Currently, this role is the migrant administrator role for our migrant programs. We'd like to revise that job description and title so that it better aligns to the CDE language, allows for a really comprehensive oversight of our migrant programs in their entirety, and it really allows us to elevate and put a higher focus on our migrant services. You'll see again here, bilingual required, of course, for this position. When we think specifically about our migrant education program, we think about, well, what is that? What does that mean for a student to get those migrant ed services? And why is it that we're proposing to move those over into the multilingual department, if you will? MEP is authorized by Part C of Title I, and it's designed to support high quality, comprehensive educational programs for migrant children to help reduce the educational disruption and other issues that result from repeated moves. So in other words, it's something extra that we design and provide to students who qualify for migrant services. This visual depicts that story in a slightly different way. If we have, let's say, 1,895 students in our district who qualify for migrant services, the first thing that student or those students get is what everybody else gets, and that's access to that high quality grade level instruction. That's what we would consider baseline. We also know that in our school district, the vast majority of our migrant students are also English language learners, which means they also qualify for services under English language development. In this scenario, you see about 1,500, so the vast majority of the 1895 are not just migrant students, but also migrant students who are English learners. Migrant ed programs are what you see on the top. So if I'm a student who is a migrant learner, not only do I get the baseline, I also, in addition to that, get services and programs that are directly funded and designed by our migrant ed program. So all students who are migrant learners are accessing the baseline and the migrant ed programs in addition to the baseline. And any student who's also an English learner is experiencing that English learner development level of supports and services as well. So that is in addition to the baseline that other students would be getting. We brought for the board this evening a first read, if you will, of the 3 different revised job descriptions that I'm proposing for today. I also want to share with you how that fits into our timeline. We have, as I shared, gathered some baseline input, both from parents and from teachers. Here tonight, we are giving and providing the board with an update of the program, both anecdotally, but also quantitatively from Ms. Grock. And we're also thinking about how do we move forward? How do we make sure that we're really expanding the services and programs for all of our multilingual learners? And because the majority of our migrant students are also multilingual students, what we want to do is to make sure there is cohesion there. And so one department allows people to work together in a way that really does support that cohesive experience for our students. We would hope that our next steps would be forming that action committee in the fall of next year, with hopefully some solid recommendations brought to the board for the winter of 2024. So taking a step back, I wanted to give an opportunity to explore the different job descriptions, and I know you have those in your board packet. And if we could start with the coordinator of multilingual services.
Excuse me, Ms. Loftus. Before you transition into the job descriptions, this has been a lengthy presentation. One, I want to see if anybody else needs to take a break. But 2, I also want to know if anybody wants to ask questions about DLI before we go into the job descriptions. If there's any questions or anything about the DLI program presentation. I can come back to them in a little bit. Okay.
There might also be a nice opportunity when we're talking about the DLI program specialist job description.
Okay.
We will proceed. So again, just in order to really both intensify and coordinate our service model, we propose for your consideration these 3 different job descriptions. I would remind you they're a first read, and so we have found that there are a few I's that need to be dotted and a few T's that need to be crossed. And I thought I might just point out what we've noticed, one position at a time, and also gather input or answer any questions about the positions as we go. So starting with the coordinator for multilingual services, you'll remember that that was a position that is an elevation of an original role, which was the multilingual program specialist. And in elevating that role, we're also adding the requirement for bilingualism. An error that is in that job description that I'll just point out so that you know that we've caught it is that on the 3rd page, we've repeated a couple of things that are on the 4th page. So we've caught some of those and we'll have those corrected before the 2nd read.
Ms. Loftus, did you, on page 14 of our board document, uh, it reads the education and experience. It's got bilingual, multilingual preferred, but on page 13, it says bilingual and target language required. So we might want, one of the things that I recommended to our superintendent is to, on page 13, we can keep bilingual and target language required. And that, we still, would prefer somebody who's multilingual if possible, but it does seem a bit redundant. But one of them says preferred, well, we're looking for required.
Are you looking at the role for coordinator of multilingual services? I apologize, I don't have the page
Yeah,
numbers.
I'm looking at the coordinator right now, the coordinator. Because I think it would,
What you see is bilingual, multilingual required under education and experiences.
yeah, so let's get you the document that we're looking at so that you could match our page numbers.
Sure.
So you'll notice on page 13 where it says education and experience,
Mhm.
the fourth bullet point down reads bilingual in target language required, which is excellent, which is I think what we're looking for. And then on page 14, under education and experience, the second bullet point reads bilingual, multilingual preferred. So we should strike most likely the one that's on page 14.
Absolutely. We were talking about the coordinator first.
So I think what's happening is that you're talking about a job
Mhm.
that is later in our agenda. And so the first one we came to was DLI.
I see.
That's possible. I definitely would still encourage us to hire, to make bilingual or multilingual preferred, or not preferred, excuse me, required, particularly because they're going to be interfacing with, multilingual parents and students. So I would make that recommendation instead of the preferred for one of the positions, make it required as well.
If you want to turn to page 16 in your board packet, that aligns with the coordinator for multilingual services job description. I apologize for that confusion. And again, as I shared, we found a few things that are duplicative, but if there's anything that you feel is missing or want to explore more or see as an error, we'd love your input.
For me, I think there is a trend in the knowledge of aspect for these job descriptions are exhaustingly long and have a bazillion bullet points. So aside from that fact, I think that promotes some redundancies, some of which that I talked to Dr. McDuffie about, but there is one thing that was left out in the knowledge of, and I think is important, and Ms. Grock has demonstrated it very, very nicely tonight, and that's an understanding of data and statistical interpretation and application for these positions. Because I don't know that that's necessarily something that's implied anywhere else, and I think it probably should be specifically noted in all of them. Because I think it's, as she noted, if we're checking to see if something's working or if we're looking at things more than qualitatively, we need to have an understanding of, are we applying the right statistical analysis to the problem and assessing it properly to get the right answer. In other words, there are variables that if we don't understand the variables, or if we misapply how we're interpreting things, we can make ourselves feel either really good or really bad. So I think it's important that those people have that
Thank you for
background.
That. Good call.
It doesn't exist. Data/statistical interpretation and application. Capacity to interpret, capacity to interpret and apply statistical analysis and data acquisition, data. Either, it could be, I mean, that's, again, this is, it doesn't have to go any particular place, but that is a part of the cumbersomeness of how these are presented, and the knowledge of runs right into ability to very often.
Yeah,
is
and
lengthy, so.
yeah, I was gonna say, we'll take a look at where
Yeah.
it would fit
Yeah.
and where it goes and bring it back to you for the second reading.
Any other thoughts or questions that you'd like to pose regarding the coordinator position?
I have some general DLI questions, but I think we should probably get through all the positions and then kind of work our way back. Because normally what we do is we get the presentation and then we have our questions, but the presentation kind of meshed those two together. So we didn't have a chance to kind of really transition over to the next part. So I'm okay with asking my questions after we're done discussing all the positions.
Okay,
Yeah,
wonderful.
and what was, and again, if we go back to the order, where are you going next?
My plan was to go to the migrant ed program director
Then
next,
that's where we'll go.
page 21.
Correct. That would be item 3D. Thank you.
Yes. So as a reminder, again, not a additional position, but really an elevation of the current position that's already in place. An enhanced role. Mhm.
I'm sorry, right off the bat, under you, the classification is management, but the salary range refers to a certificated salary range, and yet the requirement says that they need to have a teaching credential and an administrative services credential. So wouldn't that be management salary schedule?
I will flag that for HR.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Thank you.
And I appreciate Ms. Cordero highlighting that, because given the monumental tasks that these positions entail, we want to make sure that these folks are compensated, justly for, their labor. That was one of the points that we also heard from some of the educators, right, is how it's additional work, right? But I'm not quite sure if it's compensated quite yet. I didn't get a chance to ask about that, but I will, regarding like whether they're receiving EWERS for their additional time or any other sort of type of like flex time compensation, whatever we can do to make sure that these educators don't burn out also, I think is really key.
And I know you want to talk about that when we get maybe to the DLI position and when we're reflecting on part of that part of the presentation. So I'll hold on that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you would look on page 22 under representative duties, the third bullet, oversight and support for all identification and recruitment activities for the migrant ed program, is that in reference to students and families? And so
Correct.
Can we add retention to that?
Sure. I can add that additional detail.
And just,
And
I think that's, again, that's one of those things that goes along with DLI, was we want to keep track of people and keep them involved and make sure they don't drift and fall out. And I think I brought to Dr. McDuffie's attention a couple of things that were put in there twice.
Yes.
The exact same thing. I would encourage probably in all of these, but in this particular job description, knowledge of it could be, again, I don't know where it's going to fit, but culturally proficient practices or culturally responsive practices. And then also personal qualities, consensus builder, collaborative, and empathetic. I think one of the things that we want to have in our folks who are dealing with our families in these different circumstances with language, is we want to have empathy.
Thank you for bringing that up as well, because as we go through our strategic planning and talk about our beliefs, a lot of the experiences and things that we'll want from our employees will include empathy and kindness and those things that are intangible and that would be needed in all of our positions and all of our people.
Thank you. On the DLI. Are we okay to move on to the DLI position? Thank you.
Wonderful. So DLI will be beginning on page 11. Thank you. And I recognize that we've kind of blended a couple of things together, and we don't traditionally do that. We also we wanted to tell a story and to include DLI as part of our multilingual design, if you will, for the district, which is why we've moved through a couple of different layers. And now we're pivoting back to, of course, the DLI position, and then also questions or thoughts that you have about the DLI program specifically, and or what you might have with regard to expansion efforts.
Well, specific to the job application, Ms. Loftus, it's really good. I really appreciate the representative duties 6 and 7 and 8. I plussed those. I did have a little bit of a question not a question so much as a comment on 4 reading, writing, and math. I think we need to be looking at all the core subjects or inclusive of all subjects. I don't know that we need to call those out, other than those are what gets tested. So maybe we don't call them out, or we talk about across the curriculum maybe.
Striking from in to the end would allow it to be inclusive of all.
Great.
What bullet is that?
That's representative duty number 4. Page 11 is the first page of the DLI program specialist. And then another kind of global suggestion on many of our job descriptions. There is a especially with this one, there's a need to have an understanding of grant writing, and or the capacity and experience to do it, or having done it. So I would strengthen the language in the other ones, not necessarily this, but this one brought it to my attention. It says write, or in number 17 on representative duties, write or assist in writing grants and reapplications for funding of assigned programs and instructional support services. That's on page 12. I feel like that's, again, it's a little bit like the statistical analysis. I feel like we need to, and maybe this is something that we can do across the board at the district level, is train or give some kind of support in how to writing grants, but also seeking them out, because there's a lot of grants out there, I think, that probably get left by the wayside that we could take advantage of. So that's for consideration in these just job descriptions, but also in the future, maybe even a job of its own.
Noted. Thank you. Of course, we'll make adjustments based on the feedback that we've received today. We'll also go through everything with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that we're not being duplicative, if at all possible. And if anywhere there is a discrepancy where it says one thing and a different thing for bilingual versus required and preferred, we'll make sure that it's consistent before we bring it to your attention before you again. A lot of conversation around happened in developing these job descriptions about the need, the requirement for bilingual, and absolutely a hard requirement for coordinator and for the migrant ed. And then there was a little conversation around the DLI program specialist and what if we're missing somebody who would be highly qualified for this? We would prefer bilingualism in the target language specifically, but do we want to make that a requirement? And I hear you, Mr. Valencia, thinking that it should be a requirement. So I'll take that back to the team
Absolutely.
and bring it back to you in one version or another next go round.
Mhm.
Okay.
I think the other thing that may be a good clarification on that is what we're requiring of our students to be, and but more importantly, what we're requiring of the teachers to be qualified to teach within the program. Is it that same level at this the coordinator position, or is what level do we want?
Sure.
So I think that, I mean, that's also a clarification, because there could be a standard that's maybe not quite as pronounced as it is for somebody who's teaching in the curriculum.
Correct. I think like Mr. Ruiz alluded to that, right? His Spanish is not as strong as he would like it to be. So his proficiency level might make him eligible for this position because he can speak in both languages, but does he have the qualifications to teach it? At this point, not so, right? And so I think, is that what you're alluding to, John? Yeah, and I'm comfortable with that, right? That they be at least at a minimum communicate, they can communicate in, you know, both languages without having necessarily the ability to teach it at this point. And that makes sense.
Okay, we'll explore how to capture that a little bit differently than we have in the ones that indicate required, and then bring it back again for your consideration.
Does anybody have any questions or discussions around DLI in general? Since I think we're kind of going back towards that a little bit. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Valencia.
Yeah, to circle back, I was really just blown away with our DLI presenters today. I think for me, it was really just really impactful to see how it's impacted our young people, how it's impacted our parents. And so I'm trying to figure out with, you know, with our governance team, our superintendent, our board, all of our staff, you know, we know that there's challenges to growing this, but it appears so far that we're committed, right, to growing the work. And so I'm curious to see what we can do to make sure that that's a priority, because I know whenever I talk to folks in the community, right, this is one of the key things that they bring up, right? Hey, why is DLI only at Jimenez right now, right? I feel like my child is missing out. Yeah, and families in Jimenez are like, hey, my kid has the benefit of this program, but I know 10 families that want this for their kid and they're not getting it. So how can we commit ourselves to prioritizing this work to make sure that this growth happens with fidelity, as one of the teachers was saying, but also happens. I understand the argument of can't grow too quickly because we don't want it to be weak, for lack of better words, right? We don't also want it to grow so slowly that it just doesn't expand at the rate that we need it to. So what suggestions might you have at this point to see that this is that takes place, that we continue to prioritize this? Because I noticed we were getting an update, I think in like winter of 2024. But because this is such a priority, I would actually recommend that this, you know, come back for an update within 6 months, for example, as opposed to like over a year from now.
The thinking, I'll answer part of that question and then back up and answer the other part. The thinking about the winter update would be the point where a team was ready to bring some recommendations for moves, not just an update for considerations, but recommendations for whatever might be next on the horizon. You talked about how to prioritize it, and curious to know how we're going to do that and what resources we'll be using. I've mentioned a couple of times our partnership with CABE, and I've said multiple times to many people that I've had this conversation with that it's really important to have that expertise in the conversation, not just for my personal benefit and for the district's benefit, but for that team, so that they deeply understand all of the different layers, all of the advantages of a DLI program, including why you might want to consider something other than a two-way program. The words shared with me by Akabe was one way is better than no way. So is two-way I preferred? Is it a higher coveted design? Yes, the outcomes are higher in a two-way program. However, you also get very positive outcomes in a one-way program. And so part of the work will be making sure the team understands what that looks like and what that would require, if that's the direction that the team would recommend us going forward with. And so I think that's part of it, right? Is really understanding that deeply and having some experts in the room make some good recommendations, and then deciding what do we have the capacity to do. May not all happen, of course, overnight, but do we have the capacity to do something in a slightly different version somewhere? And then can we expand from there?
And I just want to add to that we are committed to DLI. It really is about, you mentioned it, Jennifer, is capacity and being able to be smart about how we move forward. And I believe maybe one of the parents mentioned it, or someone else, in regards to making sure that the program is a quality program. We just don't want a DLI program just to have a DLI program. And when I first got here and spoke with Jennifer about the program, we actually had a phone conference with our Rialto multilingual director, and actually brought the idea of, with the population of students, you may be thinking about a one-way opposed to a two-way system, and so definitely I'm not the one to be the expert, but I believe in the direction that we're going with getting a team together to really look at this and to make sure that we do this in a fashion, and even with providing recommendations to the Board of Education. It's going to be the staffing of our DLI program as well, and making sure that we methodically look at this in a way where we're not putting DLI in place without the proper support and without the capacity building of the staff. And so I just wanted to add that piece to that is something that's really important to us. Yes.
I think the first step, is getting the job descriptions that we just reviewed. We need to get qualified people into those positions in order to form that action group, to make the plan, to strategically move forward. And that if we are expecting something miraculous to happen within 6 months, we're not thinking about making it quality. We're just sprinkling. So thoughtfulness and having the right people doing the job to provide the education and the support services for students in this kind of specialized program is far more important to me than to do it in a haphazard way and to satisfy parents who simply want a program.
And I think we heard from teachers too, Mrs. Cordero, who talked about with caution, because there have been barriers along the way. Fortunately, many publishers, especially those who market toward Texas or California, they're now designing curriculum that is really specific to a DLI program. Like they shared, that wasn't the case when their journey began. And so some of the initial frustration, you talked about attracting the right people and keeping the right people, is making sure they have the right resources. We've come a really long way, and it is a major focus for, as I shared earlier with our steering committee and the pilotees, making sure as a non-negotiable that lens was on the curriculum that we would be moving forward with to even pilot. I'll put a little plug in for our residency program. Those 17 individuals who are in that residency program have passed their Spanish assessments, And we envision them as being individuals that not just diversify our workforce, but also might be ideally placed wherever we put DLI, whatever that looks like in the future. And we'll continue. We have a second cohort already being put together to start next fall. And so that's another 17 or 20 people that bring that skill set, that mindset, and that passion to the classroom. And we're just really excited to see that impact overall, and then how that might also impact the work that we're talking about specifically with DLI.
Just a couple comments. The one, when we saw the graph depicted of the trajectory of the students at this point, I think it's going to be really important to follow these kids longitudinally through high school to see what the impacts are long term. I think in a lot of these programs, that's where the real difference can be seen. And so I'm going to be interested to keep track of that and can continue to get those presentations on that data. I did also appreciate the thoroughness of inclusion of interested parties tonight. I thought that was really important. So I appreciate you doing that as opposed to just like, something that was curricular oriented or what have you. So that was, I think it was impactful for us to see and hear. And of course, I think we all agree on the side of being cautious and holding to fidelity with great teaching and all the other things that go with it. I am concerned with the keeping 7th and 8th graders on the same campus for the reasons that we saw tonight with attrition. And that was the board's concern at the last, not your last presentation, but the presentation before, when we heard from parents who asked to keep the 7th and 8th graders on that campus. So I think that's something we have to consider in the future, is if we do start to add programs, how is that going to look for our 7th and 8th graders, or maybe at the time 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, depending on what happens with facilities. What are the electives and athletics and things like that kids want to have going to look like, so that we can keep that trajectory going? So I think that's really important to their social, emotional well-being and belonging and connectedness to our schools. So I really, I think that's important. And the last thing I wanted to bring out is that I think, we get really focused on DLI because it's an amazing program, but it's also a shiny object, right? It can draw our attention, and we start to forget about some of the other things in the room. And I don't want to forget about the other pathways, the other parts of the English Learners Roadmap, and the way that we can really address all our kids' needs, and also advocate for them and acknowledge them and see them as an asset, and the people in our community as an asset, rather than worrying about who didn't make the lottery. Which I totally get. I would be right there with them, maybe one of those parents. Because I've heard from those parents, and I feel for that. But we're not doing it. We can do a better job of maybe letting them know about all the pathways, or really starting to disseminate information about the things that can happen as part of the English Learners Roadmap to get to biliteracy and to get the seal or any of those other things.
And as you know, we've started many of those efforts, specifically the seal of biliteracy pathway and raising awareness for parents and students. That has been the first step. And we're already getting some momentum there, which is really exciting. We've also invested a lot of focus and time in strategies like translanguaging, which really take that asset-based mindset and put it in the forefront of the classroom. Classrooms with, regardless of DLI, not DLI, one way, two way, regardless, that you're really taking advantage of the student's full repertoire of language, honoring that and using that to their advantage, because it is a superpower. One does help the other. And just remembering that, keeping that in the forefront of our minds.
Sorry, last thing. I do appreciate the one way. discussion, because really not something that I had considered, but I had thought about, do we have enough EOs to really make enough robust programs or a really full school of program classrooms. So I think it's important to look at everything. I appreciate that.
Some questions, John? Sure. When each presenter came with recommendations, right? Parents had recommendations, our administration, our teachers. What's the process for us to follow up on that? Because, if we wait until winter of 2024 for that, big update, my concern is that these more immediate needs are going to maybe fall by the wayside. So how can we address those recommendations from our
With regard to the requests made by the teachers, we're in pretty close contact with Mr. Ruiz, who definitely advocates for the needs of the teachers. I also have spent time with them just listening to what their struggles and what their needs are, so that it's in the forefront of my mind as well. Many of the things that they've needed over time, we've gotten there, but there's still frustration that it wasn't there originally. The addition of the DLI TOSA position, that's really a DLI coach, 1 day a week, more of a TOSA to just build that connection for the other TOSAs so that we have alignment in all areas. That was a huge move for that team as well. They really needed the expertise of the coach, just like they do in their traditional classrooms. And that had been something that they requested consistently, and we were able to meet that need. So listening to what we've been told in the past and making sure that we remember that when we're making decisions and when we're buying new things, whatever it is, it's not an afterthought, it's on the forefront. I think that some of the parents that presented tonight might have a really keen interest in being a part of an action team. And we want to make sure that we have parents involved on that action team so that we have everybody's voice involved. And so I envision that a couple of those individuals might be able to participate in that way. And then again, their voice is heard, and also we benefit from the experience they've had so far in the DLI program that we have.
Something that also occurred to me as they were presenting is, one of our students is trilingual, I think, in Hindi, Spanish, and English. We have Arabic speaking students as well, right? Some Tagalog, definitely many indigenous languages, such as Triqui and Mixteco Alto, Mixteco Bajo, just to name a few. So as we do this work, I hope that we can also ensure that we can figure out creatively, how can we incorporate some of those languages where we, that have the predominant languages besides English and Spanish. I know that's how it's traditionally thought of, and that's great. But, I think we can also think bigger than that. And how can we incorporate indigenous languages into these efforts, because they're piece about honoring their families, honoring their culture. I mean, unfortunately, that's how many cultures, how that historical memory gets lost is through language, right? So if our young people are able to maintain the languages, right, of their parents and their grandparents, then, that gives them one more thing to be proud of and to stand out in our global economy for. So include that in your conversations to see what we can do regarding including more languages beyond just Spanish.
Absolutely. Thank you. We heard a lot of good information tonight, lots of good input. So thank you.
And you were stellar in your presentation of all, being Pete and everything.
And I just wanted to say that, Jennifer, thank you for your work on this. It's very comprehensive and showing a full scope of what we currently have in our DLI program and how we want to expand that and our efforts to do so. So thank you very much to you and your team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll acknowledge receipt, or the board will acknowledge receipt of the dual language immersion DLI update. Discussion first reading of the job description, program specialist, dual language immersion. Discussion of the first reading of job description, coordinator multilingual services. And discussion of the first reading for job description, migrant ed program director, all as presented. Thank you, Ms. Loftus. At
Thank
all,
you.
at all.
And I would just like, before we adjourn our meeting, it is the recognized day of the teacher day today. And I just am hopeful that our teachers truly know how very, very much they are all appreciated.
I've seen a lot from the community in making note of it. It's been really heartening to see that. I shop at Trader Joe's like 4 times a day, so I see that chalkboard every day.
You'll see some of that at the next board meeting.
And just an aside, I guess as my board report, I'll go out of order. Mrs. Cordero and I were out at Ariana's, not this past Friday, but the Friday before, listening to avid students doing their project-based learning presentations, and really cool because they chose what their presentation or their research and then project was going to be, and then their presentation was collaborative as well. And it's really reflective of a lot of the things we've been talking about. They did a really deep dive, some of them, into social media and the adverse effects it has on their peer group, and made some correlations there and defended them and talked about them, answered questions from parents and did really great job there. And there was reflection on their part about reaching out and being kind and the positive impacts they could have on their fellow students. And I only say that because I think everything we've heard tonight really still relies on all of that, right? It still relies on that positive impact, that extending yourself just that little bit. And I recently listened to an episode of The Hidden Brain, Shankar Vedantam on NPR. And one of the big parts that he was talking about was these what we used to call random acts of kindness, but really just kindness, being kind, and what these kids were talking about, and how much the kids were talking about how impactful it was. And what he and the people who study this were saying is one of the reasons it's called random acts of kindness is because the person who's passing along that kindness doesn't think much of it. And they don't think it really mattered. Doesn't make a difference, or it's just what people do. The person who has that act put upon them, who has had the kindness given and received it, it made some major impact. It makes all kinds of difference. And so I just want to keep that thought as we've kind of been going over that time and time again, and we hear it from our kids in their kindness presentations. I talked to the kids at Sanchez, and they were doing all kinds of great stuff there too. But I think it's really important to remember how impactful we can be to one another, and it doesn't really seem like that much to us. So just put that forth, that little tiny bit of effort, or do what you think isn't going to really be that big a deal, because it might be. And I think that's super important to our kids. That's about all I got.
And it could be as simple as thank you.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Of course, we can have board comments, but we don't have that on the agenda. So I just wanted to make everybody aware of that.
That's why I jumped. Got one? Oh, no. Mr. Valencia, would you like to say something?
Sure.
Mr. Valencia would like to say something.
I recently read in the Santa Maria Times an article connected to I believe it's called the Santa Maria Bonita Elementary School District Soccer League. And so I was really happy to see that that's taking place for our young people. We've had students come, right, and share their successes, with their athletics. And we know the connection, right, that exists between our young people getting involved in extracurricular activities such as sports and their ability to be connected to school, do better academically. So I really want to continue to encourage our staff to continue to work on that, expand those opportunities. Because it was, yeah, so major props to the folks that are working on that, and please continue to grow that to the best of your abilities. Something that I would want to request for a future agenda would be like an Avid update, just to see how our Avid program is doing in the district. So sometime in the next, couple of months, I would love to hear, where is Avid at in terms of which schools do we have it at? What needs do they have? What successes are they having? And then how can we as a board, support those efforts or those places where they feel like they might need some help?
A consensus from the board to pursue that? Okay.
I'll work with you, John, to bring that and see how we bring that to the board.
Excellent. And then I wanted
you.
to also share Teacher Appreciation Week, is this week. Why have a day, Ms. Cordero? We can have a whole week, a whole month, a whole year. Thank you, Dr. McDuffie, for, presenting some of the pins, right, to some of our staff. You might probably allude to that maybe if you have any comments, but I really appreciate seeing the many gestures that people are using for Teacher Appreciation Week. Educators, this particular time is really tough. I know many of our staff are pretty feeling exhausted. I know I'm a lot sleepier than the normal because this time of year is really, really tough. So many deadlines, so many needs. Young people are getting antsy. They see the break coming, and they're ready for it to be now, and it's not quite there yet. So I get that because I'm in the classroom too. And so I just want you all to please continue to take care of yourselves by resting, by eating well, exercising, reaching out to therapy or whatever it is that you need to feel grounded. I wanted to also share a couple of other things that I had the privilege of attending the migrant regional event that happened at El Camino, where Dr. McDuffie was also there. And it was really outstanding to hear our families figuring out ways to support their migrant youth. We heard a keynote of a gentleman who was helping families advocate and be more mindful of also of like how we encourage our young people to do better with their grades, right? Because sometimes we can be a bit harsh with how we say, hey, well, why you got an F or a D or a C, right? First kind of saying, hey, well, all right, I see you got an A or an a B here, but I see that there's some growth here. So it was really cool to see how open the families were to like thinking about best practices on how they approach, and supporting their own children, because sometimes those are just blind spots, right, on how we approach that. So some of the feedback that I got from some of the families there was they prefer to have that meeting in November, I think, because they say it's really good because a lot of our families that work in agriculture, that timing is a bit better for them versus what just happened a couple of weeks ago, I believe. And so I want to encourage our staff to look into that more because I think it affected the attendance of the regional meeting. So let's look into that to ensure that the timing works best for our families so that they have maximum participation. And then I also want to encourage all of our staff to attend these migrant regional meetings. It's an opportunity to interact with our families, with our students, and so I want to encourage all of our staff to get to know our families and to make an effort also to attend these things when possible. Another opportunity that I had the privilege to attend was the Battles Family Wellness Night. That was really awesome to see how they partnered with, the Santa Maria Police Department, with the firefighters. I saw folks leading dances there, and it was really wonderful to see our young people learning how to ride a bike. And so major props to the folks at Battles for organizing that. I think it's a really cool model, and I hope that other, sites can gain some inspiration from it and find other opportunities to integrate wellness into their teaching. Because I feel like just like we teach students math and English and science and history, I think learning about wellness in and of itself, right, deserves, its rightful place. So us figuring out how to incorporate that content, right, throughout our school day. Not all of our families have the opportunity to come after school. So I look forward to continuing to figure out with our staff ways that we can incorporate wellness in all of our courses so that our staff and our students, have the mental wellness that they need to be their best. I also want to mention that the major robotics event happened this past Saturday, I believe. I didn't have the privilege to be able to attend, but I know folks like Mr. Jeff Cooper, who's partnering with us, right? It's so awesome to see that high school students are partnering with our school district because these types of events make learning, so engaging, so practical. It connects highly to STEM, right, education. And so I look forward to seeing how else we can continue to grow this work, because from what I can see, it's having a major impact on our young people and our families and our community. So major props to all the folks that are working on that. I look forward to continuing to see that work grow. Thank you all very much.
Seeing as we did a math adoption tonight, I would be remiss if I didn't mention my 7th and 8th grade math teacher, Mrs. Thomas. I forgot her in the list, but she made a huge impact. And then there was also Mrs. Farinetti, my 8th grade home ec teacher. So those two are the only ones I forgot. I just wanted to remember.
If we're acknowledging math teachers, Mrs. Maria Giordano was presented teacher of like the year by SMEA. She was my 7th and 8th grade teacher.
It's a big time in life.
Yes.
Dr. McDuffie?
I don't have prepared remarks, but I just want to just say to all staff, take care of yourself. As Board Member Valencia mentioned, this is the time of year where there's a lot of things happening. And remembering what you said, President Hollins said about kindness and how very important that is as we go through this time together. So I'll have more remarks on teacher appreciation, Day of the Teacher, teacher appreciation, as well as classified week, next board meeting. Thank you.
Given that segue, the next regular board meeting of the Santa Maria Bonita School District will be held on May 24th at 6 p.m. at the Sousa Student Support Center, 708 South Miller Street. Materials distributed and presented at the board meeting are available upon request from the superintendent's office. With no further business before the board, may I hear a motion, please? Yep.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Valencia, seconded by Mrs. Cordero, that the meeting be adjourned. The time is now 8:43.